The Spin-Off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
There's a radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-Off or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, like, I don't know, something like we discover that all this time Annabelle has actually been the national former candidate for Upper Harbour, catfishing us over the pod.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's just take it as read. Let's let the listeners use their imagination.
I like it.
As if we did it.
Yeah.
Are you ready for us to get started, Tina Tiller? Tēnā koutou katoa, this is Gone by Lunchtime. My name is Toby Manhire. Annabelle Lee Mather, kia ora.
I think I might change my stage name to Annabelle Lilibet Mather.
Just a little bit.
It's got a ring to it.
It does have a good ring to it. And Ben Diana Thomas, kia ora.
Very upset to learn that I don't get a title.
You turned, I just assume you turned it down.
No hereditary. Did you notice there were heaps of knights and dames this year for Queen's birthday?
There were 8.
There were 8. That's a lot historically.
Is
but
it?
then everyone's handing theirs back. So they've got they've got a surplus of honours piling up in the Prime Minister's office that they need to sort of get out the door.
There is
again.
that super posh one, isn't there, where there's like 20 in there.
The Order of New Zealand, which is the greatest living New Zealanders.
Which is even
Jonathan
above.
Hunt.
Yep.
Lloyd Gearing, a man who was expelled from a voluntary club for breaking its rules. Jim Bolger, I think, and Helen Clark. Actually, they probably deserve it.
Well, because Jim Bolger refused the knighthood, didn't he? But we managed to get
Sir Richie McCaw,
Republican.
The man.
Yeah, Sir Richie McCaw.
Ranginui Walker also turned down a knighthood.
I bet he did.
The man.
Yep.
Sir Richie McCaw, sorry.
Well, Richie turned down the knighthood after we won the 2011 World Cup.
Yeah, but then he took it, so it doesn't count.
But he did accept the title, which meant he was officially one of the 20 greatest living New Zealanders. He's like, oh shucks, no, I'm not going to take a knighthood. I just want recognition for my humble achievements as one of the 20 greatest living Kiwis on the planet.
Ever.
Annabelle, this is an intervention.
Yes.
It has come to our attention that you have been sitting on a story about Nick Smith for some time for the Hui.
Yeah, was leaked to us.
Why have you not released it to the public?
I've just been, like in winter and it starts to get cold and you get quite tired quite quickly and just...
Sore muscles.
Yeah, just haven't got around to it.
Explosive story about the altercation to end all altercations. You just can't be bothered.
We'll get to it at some point in the future, I'm sure. But
And Ben, you had something to put to Annabelle as well.
Yeah, the most amazing news since we've last been together. So we've had alleged spies resigning from Parliament and that being uncovered, that there was a deal between the parties. We've had the announcement of the Climate Change Commission's report. But the biggest revelation politically is that Nick Smith could be removed from Parliament for yelling. No. I wish I had known this when I was in the Beehive.
It was an altercation.
I think the altercation was just yelling, wasn't it? Some little Jamie Lee Ross snitch recording from behind a door.
Did you ever get yelled at when you were working in Parliament, Ben Thomas? Did Chris Finlayson yell at you? Tell us about this. Just tone of silence.
Finlayson's not a yeller.
No.
Look, but
Would he though stand like
Parliament
on a
is a
chair
raised voice sort of
and
place.
denounce you in Latin? That's the kind of thing I can imagine
That
Finlayson
feels like
doing.
what
Lots
he
of
would
denunciations in Latin, but that's fine because you don't understand what's going on. So it all seems, you're like, maybe it's a compliment. But, when I was in Parliament, if somebody was listening behind a door to you, like screaming your head off at somebody, when you came out, you'd be applauded. I remember one like half-hour yelling match with Paddy Gower on the phone, and I came out of my office to like go and get some water to rehydrate or something, and there was just a big semicircle of people listening outside. I think that if Parliament loses its yelling culture, it loses quite a lot.
Well, except a sort of experienced senior MP ideally should not be shouting terrifyingly at their staffers. That's not quite the same thing as a rambunctious press secretary hollering at Patrick Gower.
I mean, we don't know the details. All we know is that, it was like this possibly illegal secret recording.
No, it's not. It's only illegal if both parties are unaware of it. As so long as
But the
one
person
party
recording
is
it
aware.
wasn't one of the parties.
Yeah, the person. This was like an outsider.
But had the other person agreed for them to record it?
Oh, we don't know that detail. A lot of questions.
And
So
they'll
many
all will be revealed on the Herbie.
Eventually.
It's been one of a few stories that have set back the Good Ship National in the last week. There was also the story about Jake Bezzant, who a failed candidate in Upper Harbour, who it turned out had been doing some pretty unpleasant, alleged stuff relating to an ex-partner, and that emerged on another podcast. I don't even know what the name of that podcast was, because there's only one podcast in my life. And that ended up with Judith Collins sort of using some pretty strong language. What did she call Bezzant?
She definitely referred to his perverted behaviour. Yeah, like and to her credit, Collins has always been very strong on this sort of thing. She was the one National Party MP who spoke out about John Key's ponytail pulling. She was very firm about the Andrew Falloon allegations last year. Collins is Collins has always actually set a very high standard for improper behaviour, in those sorts of respects. A terrible week for organised crime around the country. Did you read that story about the criminals all signed up to this
set
fake
up an app.
FBI app?
I don't know what your segue is
to do encrypted messaging, and so it's a terrible week for members of the mongrel mob kingdom in New Zealand who have been arrested as part of a sweeping criminal sting operation and found out they've been sexting Jake Bezzant for the last 6 months.
Wow. And in other news of national MPs, Paul Goldsmith put his party in the mire again when he said that on balance colonialism had been good.
Was it colonialism or colonisation?
Colonisation.
Colonisation, big pardon.
Yeah.
How's your calculations going at the moment? I see you're working on your phone there a bit, Annabelle. Are you doing a balance sheet on the pros and cons?
I mean, well, obviously it's been awesome to be the sickest, the poorest, the most in prison, the most homeless. So, I mean, who could argue with the statistics? Clearly it's been fantastic. And obviously, it's not like you can just come over and have an encounter with the culture, maybe do some trade and share some technology and resources and then, leave them be.
Leonie was
it was an inevitable outcome, wasn't it?
Leonie was doing some back-of-the-envelope calculations yesterday. One of them in the pro column was salt and vinegar chips. So
I feel. See,
Hadn't thought of that.
Well, this is the but of
But
course.
you could just be like a dinner party, like bring your salt and vinegar chips and your reduced cream.
potluck
I
dinner.
mean, you can't even put reduced cream in there because that came after.
You could get a lot of salt and vinegar chips for all of the flax up north. I think if Ngāpuhi had really wanted salt and vinegar chips, they probably could have bartered for them without sort of losing all their land.
okay,
In fact, like I'm no investment advisor, but actually, if you hung on to your capital, you would create an income stream for salt and vinegar chips far into the future. Interestingly, because Goldsmith's actually a historian, that's his background, and it is strange that he would make sort of a sweeping statement like that, which, admittedly wasn't that uncommon, a few years, probably a decade or two ago. But you think that generally we have a more sophisticated understanding now, and that is one argument for teaching New Zealand history a bit more prominently in schools.
I think that's because he genuinely believes that colonisation has been good, and it has been for non-Māori, but obviously not for Māori. And just those sorts of regressive view, it's very much seated in superiority, and this idea that were it not for Pākehā coming here and bringing amazing things like guns and diseases and writing.
chips.
That we'd all be running around in grass skirts, and just the lack of sophisticated thinking around this, or, the idea that, two nations can engage with one another without one having to usurp the other or subjugate them, I think is a really interesting insight into some of the thinking. I also thought it was interesting how quickly Judith Collins kind of shut it down within the party too, and when other people were canvassed, like Tob Muller,
Chris Luxon,
who didn't have any Māori in his top 10 or whatever it was, they disagreed with their colleagues, so that was interesting.
Yeah, Chris Luxon seemed quite quickly out of the traps with, I have no reason to doubt that it's a firmly held view. I'm sure it is. But also part of me wondered that there was a little bit of, what would John Key do?
The thing that's interesting about it too is that it's really off-brand in the post-settlement era to be making those sorts of statements, because as Māori become increasingly empowered economically, you really need to get alongside and understand treaty partnerships and those sorts of concepts, rather than the concept of cultural superiority.
Yeah, and even aside from that, that's a good point, because in the treaty settlement legislation includes apologies for all the terrible things the Crown has done. It has figures about land loss. It has, the apologies set out in quite a lot of detail just how bad the effects of Crown actions on iwi have been over the years.
Yeah.
And it would actually be nice if, I think when we were doing treaty settlements, when I was in the Beehive, being either complemented or upbraided in Latin, we'll never know. There was a lot of focus on the part of settlements which is about redress, money, land, and there was a bit of focus about co-governance, which is now coming into more sort of attention now. But the other part of it is, the actual apology and historical account, which is just as central a part of a settlement, because you're getting everything on record. And, if I was back there now, I would probably be putting more of an emphasis on that historical record part of settlements than maybe we did, because it's really interesting when people become more aware of the actual history. A lot of the resistance to things like commercial redress kind of drops away, and people are like, shit, doesn't seem like much compared to what's been lost.
And the other thing too is it's important to acknowledge that colonisation is an ongoing process. It's still in train today, and the inequity that arose from colonisation is still baked in the system and disadvantaging Māori. It's not over. Just on that too, just coming back to Nick Smith, can I say that it's fair to say that he won't be missed by Māori, and an example of his poor relationships with Māori is what happened during the foreshore and seabed, which kind of started in his own electorate. And what was happening is that companies were putting in, for resource consent to put in, for aquamarine farming, and they were doing well. But when local iwi were putting in consents, all of their consents were being rejected, and it was that ongoing process of having their consents rejected where they started to look for another way where they could also participate in that part of the industry. And that's how the foreshore and seabed, the original ruling came out that said Māori have the right to test their rights to the foreshore and seabed, and he was very quick to jump on a soapbox.
He was the first out of the gates.
He was the first out of the gate and has remained out the gates ever since.
People have been trying to round him up since 2003.
So there's some irony that he is having his spot taken by a wahine Māori.
Who is among the MPs that you've interviewed as part of the season 2 of Matangirea?
Yes.
I saw some images on social media. It looked like you were in Wellington just last night.
We had our launch last night at Backbenchers.
How was it?
It was awesome.
Yep.
Dover came.
Yeah.
Ron Mark came.
Ron
He's just
Mark.
got out of hospital. He's had quite significant shoulder surgery.
How is he?
Georgina, he's awesome.
Is he good spirits?
He's in great spirits.
Okay.
Georgina Bayer came.
Was he wearing a hat?
Louisa Wall, Willie Jackson.
Was Ron Mark wearing a hat?
Of course he
Dover
was.
and Ron, you should
They
have
both
had,
they
you
look
should have
like
had the launch at
twins.
Dakota on Courtney Place. It's like free cowboy hats for everyone who comes in.
Dover and Ron look like they had sent each other a memo about what they were going to wear, because they've both turned out like always beautifully dressed. With their big cowboy hats on, so it was very cool.
And the news this morning was full of one of the interviews, which I think Mikey Sherman has done, with Paula Bennett. And you mentioned Todd Muller before. Muller? Did we ever decide what it was?
Muller.
Mueller. In which she describes how she had a call at 7 a.m, I think she said, and he basically said to her on, day 2 or whatever of the after the coup that there would be no place for her, etc., etc.
Yeah, that she was going to be heavily demoted.
I mention that because it does wind back into this broader question of the situation that the National Party finds itself in, and that kind of, it does, for all her, whatever her strengths or weaknesses are, Judith Collins had to pick up a party that was in a state, right?
Matthew Hooden,
those 53 days. Yeah, well,
wrote a great
friend.
column.
He had nothing to do with it. He had nothing to do with it. No, his fingerprints are not all over
an unfortunate
that
front
53-day
row seat
catastrophe.
He wrote from the sanitarium where he's currently still in recovery by the coast. He wrote about this sort of 4-week period where obviously there were all these resignations. The Falloon scandal hit, the Hamish Walker scandal hit, which included Michelle Bogue. This was when the Jake Bezzant allegations about his slightly inflated CV came to light, but the party continued on with him as a candidate. It was when apparently the deal was struck between National and Labour to
shuffle out the door
Raymond Tuo and Zhang Yang after allegedly being briefed on security intelligence issues relating to the two. So there was this just kind of 2-week hellmouth that opened, 4-week hellmouth that opened for National, and their sort of, the repercussions are still coming. Jake Bezzant, it's easy to sort of make fun of him, and I think that social shaming is an important part of the process for somebody who's been that much of a scumbag, allegedly.
He denies the scumbaggery.
Does he actually deny it, or did he just say there's two sides?
He denied it to the Herald.
Like, when people break up, like, there's a lot of emotion.
A lot of stuff happens when you break up.
Sometimes you get their naked pics and you post them on the internet.
Yeah,
to make you feel better.
Sometimes they're still logged in on your phone, and so you accidentally conduct sexting conversations with their exes for a few months. That poor woman, when she was interviewed by Heather Duplessis Allen, and she was like, I didn't want to, cause him problems. I wanted him to get help. But then this year when I heard he was doing it again, just awful.
But the point you're getting to, Ben,
but the point is
that he
was in a very winnable seat.
He was in a winnable seat in Upper Harbour, a gift of a seat, and had there been the necessary screening, searching of the internet, talking to people who knew him to make sure that he was the guy for the job.
Maybe what National need to do is start sexting their candidates.
They need to go down
to see who sex back, and then I think that would be a filter to apply.
Mark Dalder has a story
back, then you can't
on Newsroom this morning about how immigration created all these fake social media accounts to basically test whether or not people are telling the truth about their claims, about with their applications. Maybe that's what the National Party did. They need to get Merv. A Merv unit to create a whole lot of sock puppet accounts. Take some tips from, as you say, Ben, the police. Create a few false apps, and then before you know it, they'll just be churning out, John Key and Jenny Shipley.
It is this what Hooten described it as, this fundamental unseriousness, and I think that's a good way to describe it. After the Bezzant allegations came out, the National Party just sort of said, it's fine. People massage their CVs sometimes, Well, actually, it's a huge red flag. When you find people who've done a bit of CV inflation, it usually ends up with them drunk in Queenstown saying, don't you know who I am?
Hamner Springs, sorry. My apologies. Sorry, Aaron Gilmore.
I mean, obviously we're speaking generally.
Wow, it's a blast from the past.
But anyway, Peter Goodfellow should go. I mean, if your party president is responsible for essentially fundraising and candidate selection, and the candidate selection has basically just been like a Hieronymus Bosch painting, and there are currently charges in the High Court about fraudulent donations to the National Party. So it's hard to see where old Ned Flanders is adding value here.
The irony is the way I see this is it's kind of been good for Judith, because it's taken the heat out of some of the unfortunate things she's said recently, and she has been, openly critical and quick to disavow those guys. So in a funny way, it's kind of made her look quite competent and onto it. Like when the people around her kind of screw up is when she's sort of at her best.
She has some authority for a moment. That is a long bow.
Well, there is that. Obviously the circumstances around Nick Smith's resignation are a little bit murky, because he said, I was advised this story was going to break, so I decided to get ahead of it. Now it seems that Judith Collins was the person who advised him the story was going to break. The story hasn't quite broken yet.
Like he's just been sold a massive dummy.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get the feeling with Collins that, if she's in a bit of trouble, her first instinct is just to go back to what she knows and take someone down. It's... just to kind of centre herself. And
I mean, on the question of whether or not...
Just to get grounded. Go
back to what you know. It's like when you do Pilates, Ben, isn't it?
That's right.
Some people meditate and other people destroy other people's careers.
All's well that ends well.
The reality of it was, though, because there was a press conference on Friday, right? And... Judith Collins had a press conference at what's the yacht club, down by the Harbour Bridge, where the election night party, which didn't go terribly well, but it was returned to the Westhaven Yacht Club. What do you want it called? Squadrons Club. I don't know. Anyway, she was there to kind of go back to absolutely core national oppositionism, which is in defence of roads. Absolutely red meat for the national base, these bastards are trying to take away your roads. And she spoke for a minute on that, and then all the questions were about Jake Bezzant and Nick Smith. So, well, I take your point, Annabelle. Really, I don't think it on the whole helps, because I do think that is, and we should probably talk about that a little bit, but this, the New Zealand upgrade project, which has had a blowout by $6 billion or whatever over the course of 14 months, and the pivot towards more climate-appropriate, non-fuel-based solutions, the effective scrapping of Mill Road, that is kind of classic National Party territory, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And with the announcement of the Climate Commission's all-encompassing recommendations today,
which are just coming. We're actually, I should have said this earlier. We're talking on late on Wednesday morning, and we've actually just got some printouts of the stuff there, so we're going to have to talk about it on the fly. At the moment, Annabelle's just analysing the numbers
quickly.
She's how long have we got?
We've got 3 minutes.
This is Climate Adaptation.
We are the Pōtiki of the Taiao.
And the words of those keeping the home fires burning.
It's more than just going along and planting some trees. You got to be able to defend that place to the end of your life.
We have the solutions. We just need to come back to the belief in ourselves as rangatira.
Join me, Nadine Hura, and Ruia Āpirehama for Ko Papa Ko Rangi Series 2, Ahi Ka. Brought to you by Te Komato o Te Tonga, the Deep South Challenge, out now on the Spin-Off Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Look, ample ground for the National Party to make hay on this in the sense that everybody agrees something needs to be done about climate change. As Stephen Mills, the Labour Party pollster, said, the owner of the company that polls for the Labour Party, said on Monday on RNZ, all of the testing, once you drill in with the voters, is that they don't want to pay for it. And any increase to their cost of living on the back of climate change action is a political danger territory. It's been that way for the entire time since we started getting into an ETS. As soon as you pick out some area or sector that is going to suffer because of an ETS, immediately political pressure comes on for exemptions, for subsidies.
Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
That's right. And it is so complex. You might say, well, look, we're going to have a gigantic bridge for walking and cycling, over the harbour. Well, how does the carbon cost of that match up to having a few bike ferries that run on electric power? You're looking at such huge sort of multi-dimensional kind of chess for these issues that, it is interesting that, in the last sort of month or so, people have been talking about, the grand plan, the architecture of He Puapua, which seeks to reshape New Zealand society. And it's a good example of this tendency in New Zealand politics to see the hidden conspiracies and not the ones that are actually taking place in front of you. Because the Climate Commission's recommendations actually are a central government plan which will change everything about how we live. And it's just happening in public. And so no one gets exercised about it because they don't think that there's some, hidden Illuminati agenda.
And the Climate Change Commission final report, which came back, it's sort of coming back as we speak. We're just printing it out right now. Had 15,000 submissions, and it includes 3 suggested pathways, which is the word of the moment, for the government to implement the requirements. The government now goes away. Jacinda Ardern is, I think, about to deliver a speech in which she's going to go reiterate the nuclear challenge of our generation stuff, so she's not backing down on that. And then before the end of the year, they have to return with the plan, which is the real when the rubber really hits the road is when that plan comes back. And so we'll probably convene a podcast for 4 p.m. on December the 24th to discuss that as it is released. But it is, that's when the points that you make, Ben, about whether or not people have people want heaven but whether or not they want to do the necessary dying in order to climb there, that's when it's going to become really tricky, right? More prosaically, on that bridge, the more kind of base political challenge for the Labour government is delivery or implementation or whichever synonym you choose for the moment. But that's the other area where, if we recall before COVID, it was in January of last year, I think, that this massive infrastructure package was outlined with a super group of MPs from ministers from Labour and New Zealand First, and then COVID happened and everything changed in terms of people's expectations and so on. But it also swept away the main opposition challenge of the moment, which was, where's the delivery? Remember, it was called the Year of Delivery, and that kind of, we forgot about that. But a $685 million bridge for cycling and pedestrians, I don't know, it could be a light rail type situation.
Well, that's right. I mean, will it have 1/3 of the impact on New Zealanders' lives that the $2 billion Kiwi Build program has? Will it have a quarter of the impact of the $3 billion light rail project? I mean, it will probably be equal to both in that nothing will happen, particularly during this term. But look, if you can keep announcing new things, you can have momentum. The real implementation and delivery issue is going to be vaccines this year. At some point, New Zealanders will notice that the rest of the world has actually gone back to normal, that 660 aren't playing here anymore because they can go overseas and play to crowds.
Well, I don't know about the second part of that. No.
and at that point, people will start thinking, well, wasn't the whole point of elimination that we were going to buy time before we got a vaccine rather than to wall us off as an Atlantean civilization lost to the rest of the world in the South Pacific?
Well, that's a bit of a tangent. We're not going to go down that particular pathway for now. We'll cover that next time. I did want to touch on, though, Annabelle, I know you were desperate to talk about the Queenstown summit. You're desperate to talk about Jacinda and ScoMo and the luge and the gondola.
Did they go on the luge in the gondola?
Oh, they didn't talk. They did go on the gondola
up the skyline.
They went up the skyline on the gondola, but what they didn't show. So I can't confirm that it happened. Is them having a cheeky spliff and going down on the luge together.
That would have been cool. Did they do the paddle boat things?
I assume they did the paddle boat thing.
Cool.
I mean.
We're all best friends now. It's fine.
But
I'm still not talking to Australia.
The disappointment
that they've made up.
I think we can all agree was that it didn't live up to the trailer, did it? It was like the Phantom Menace, amazing trailer. Everyone gets excited. That 60 minutes one I'm talking about, and then the ScoMo-Jacinda summit was quite boring.
That's right. There was no shirt fronting.
No shirt fronting.
No head butting. None of the...
No eye gouging.
Annabelle's already leaving. Sorry about that rambly podcast. Sometimes it happens.
Hey, let's take the $3 billion for light rail and we'll give it to the nurses.
Oh, yeah.
Should we do that?
On strike today.
We'll give it to them.
And then they can cycle to work. Thank you to Flick.
Oh, yeah, thank you to Flick. Sorry, Flick, that Toby forgot to mention you earlier in the podcast. And spin-off members.
Yeah, if you want more of this, support spin-off members.
Okay, bye.
I reject the premise of the question.
Sunday on 9 and 9 now.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spin-Off. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spinoff. You can help us keep all of The Spinoff's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.